I noticed that I would slowly start compromising on things, and those original restrictions I'd set for myself to prevent myself from going down that path, they would start to slip. I still was like, no, no, it's just a small deal. It's not a big problem. Like, I'll just not do it ever again. Like, yeah, I happened to look at that website today, but I won't look at it tomorrow, and I won't look at it anymore. I already got this. Look at this success that I've had so far. And then you do.
Today, we're talking about the number one obstacle that prevents relationship recovery, and specifically in the context of porn and sexual addiction. Now, this is a very complex issue. Obviously, it's affecting many, many, many families around our world, and it is growing in number. And it is something that we are passionate here at Rewire for Success to help people be educated on what it is that this actually is going to take to get to the other side of. We have joining us our men's recovery coach, Kyler Miller. Kyler, welcome. We are so excited to have you on today. This is your first time doing one of our podcasts with us, so we're thrilled. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And Kyler, you have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in clinical psychology. You have worked in crisis situations with families and children, and you're currently a behavioral health consultant. And I'm just want to have you share a little bit more about your background and what brought you to us, and maybe even share a little bit about your own journey that you've been on, because I know that this is very near and dear to your heart as well, the mission that we have here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've spent a significant amount of time working with families in crisis and in the behavioral health field. Much of my experience and expertise is in mental health, with my master's in clinical psychology. I almost completed a master's in clinical mental health counseling. We'll see if we get back to that at some point. But I have a pretty extensive history with pornography and my own battle against it and my eventual success with it. And when I first saw the opportunity to apply with Rewire for Success, um, I, I couldn't believe what I saw in front of me. As I was going through the applications and just, perusing what was open and available, I saw this ad for a pornography recovery coach for couples, and I just couldn't believe it because I've had such a distaste, no, I would say hatred of pornography for most of my life. And to potentially have the opportunity to join on with a team to help people recover from it and walk through similar steps that I did in my life, it didn't seem like it was real. It kind of seemed like a false ad of some kind. But I decided to take the opportunity and apply, and I'm so glad that I did, and I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
So,
so it's
no.
so funny to hear you say that you thought it was a false ad. Somebody tricking you that this is a thing.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I'm serious.
Yeah,
I, it's not something that society really takes seriously right now.
right.
And I would hope at some point in the future that might change. But just to see that there was at least someone w willing to take it seriously and even having like a full program to help battle against it was pretty incredible to see. So I'm glad I took that jump and decided to apply.
Absolutely. And so are we,
Yes.
because we're very happy to have you. And yeah, just the amount that you are able to bring to the table when we're in those conversations, especially with men on Fridays in the groups, and when you are working with a couple in a disclosure process, just your ability to know the process firsthand and to know the struggles that men are going through. It allows you to show up for them in ways that somebody who just is a counselor and goes to get some extra education on this to help specialize in that area to help somebody, they just don't have the depth of the emotional experience of what it's actually like to be in these different situations.
Mhm.
And I think that that value that you bring is just incredible, and it's not anything that can be taught.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a fire, a passion that comes with me with my hatred for this type of thing, for
Mhm.
pornography. So, um, And I think you're right. I think there's therapists out there who do attempt to help others in their battle against pornography, but if they've either not gone through it themselves or are not themselves fully convinced that it's a bad and damaging thing, it can be really hard for them to provide the right support for people who are really struggling against it. So,
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot of people that even have talked with us about how their therapist has told them that it's really a her issue and not a
mm,
him issue or a addiction issue, that they don't even believe that it can be an addiction. So it really does matter what help you're getting, and making
mm.
sure that you're in alignment with the beliefs and values there and alignment with the reality of what we're seeing scientifically is impacting, how porn is impacting the brain and relationships all across the world.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, because there's not a lot of therapists who like take it seriously or, recognize the significance of the addiction. And so the amount of help that exists um, is very small. When you're trying to fight it yourself, um, it's really difficult. And it takes a long time, a lot of relapse, a lot of falling back into things. And it's it is a struggle, and I'm speaking from experience. My own battle with it was tough and long.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine that that would be true. And as we're talking about the number one obstacle that prevents relationship recovery, how
Mm.
long did it take to finally get to the other side of this? What was it like to go through that battle?
Yeah. I was initially exposed to pornography when I was 10 years old, and it was just one of those times where you're hanging out with friends and a friend decides to show you something, and you don't realize at the time the significance of the event, but um, that sparked a curiosity, and that caused me to start seeking out more and more content. And so it spiraled into a full-blown addiction. It really wasn't until I had graduated from high school that I started to realize how serious of a problem it was. I was fully embracing it all throughout high school, and even in the first year of college, I was still just allowing myself to look at pornography and engage with it on a continuous basis. Um, on my second year of college is when I decided that I was going to get serious about actually trying to battle it. And for about 4 years, there was this continuous battle where I knew every time that I ended up masturbating that it was something I wanted to stop, something I wanted to get rid of, something I wanted to remove out of my life. And I would go maybe 1 or 2 days and think that maybe, oh, this was finally it. That was that last time that I'd ever engage with it before I'd fall right back into it again. And at the time, I didn't really have any structure. So it was really just this knowledge that it was not good for me. And I knew that it was something I needed to stop, but I felt like there wasn't really anything available to help me to actually battle it. And so at first I started to gather some other friends who also had similar addictions, and we would kind of share our experience. We would try and check in with each other frequently, but that didn't really seem to help as much, especially since just every week we would be checking in and saying, yep, I did it again. Yep, I did it again. Yep, I did it again. I even at one point implemented some blockers on my phone and on my computer to prevent me from seeing content. But even that, I would know how to get around the blocker. All it would take was a moment where I really had that intense desire, and then I would spend an hour, sometimes 2 hours, looking through anything I could and finding any sort of way to get past those blockers so that I could finally access that content. So it really wasn't until after those 4 years that I really decided to try and get serious about how I was going to battle it. But still at that time, I didn't have any structure. After I'd graduated from college and as I begun my master's in clinical psychology, I decided to put together kind of a framework for myself to look at my battle in. And in that framework, I decided, okay, this is how I was going to start strategizing. And so I conceptualized it into four different pieces. I conceptualized it into my eyes, my brain, my hormones, and my heart. And so the way that I saw it is that there's the temptations that are constantly, being shown to me both in the world, um, online, on my phone, on a computer, and so I had to find a way to respond to that so that that temptation was not as prevalent. And so that was the eyes portion. To me, the brain portion was fantasizing, was the random thoughts, the inspirations to start looking at pornography and start going down that path. Um, the hormones was just acknowledging that, as soon as I start to think about it or as soon as I start seeing a temptation, then very quickly the hormones in my body are going to start building up and I'm going to desire it more and more and more and more. And so I have to cut it off at the root as best as I can. And then finally, the heart portion for me was knowing that, I could make war against all those other three aspects, but unless I really addressed my core desires, my core needs, the traumas of my past, and whatever was actually causing me to desire the porn, that I was never going to make any progress. So from there, I spent basically my entire time in that master's program, really trying to implement that as best as I could. So I once again implemented some blockers. I made sure I was talking to friends. I would acknowledge when I first started seeing content, how it changed my body and changed my hormones. Um, and then I also started to address that aspect of the heart, that loneliness that I felt, that desire for connection, the stress of the day, anything that caused me to start looking to pornography. And so, I found that I started making progress once I got serious and I had somewhat of a structure laid out for me, but it was still 3 more years before I finally saw like a total elimination from my life. And I actually, at one point, I got to a point where I was able to avoid masturbating to porn for a full year. But after that year, I once again relapsed and was right back into my addiction. Um, and one thing that I noticed during then is because I didn't have a full-blown structure, um, even though I had a couple strategies and plans in place, I noticed that I would slowly start compromising on things. And those original restrictions I'd set for myself to prevent myself from going down that path, they would start to slip. And I would slowly start to get closer, an inch closer to pornography. So I would start looking up things online that I knew would inevitably lead to that. I would start browsing websites that I knew might have content on there that would start that dopamine release for me. And so again, eventually I slipped back into it. So um, I look back on the addiction that I had and on the victory that I've had since then, and I'm grateful that I have been able to fight against this. But sometimes I look back on it and I wonder, did it really need to take 7 years? 7 years of constant failure, 7 years of constantly saying no to things and really struggling against it before I finally found the success that I was hoping and looking for. So I think that was the most difficult part for me. Which is why, again, I'm so happy to have found Rewire for Success because I think if I had had something like this in my own journey, then it probably would not have taken that 7 years. Hopefully, it would have taken a far less amount of time just to have that accountability, that structure, that plan, and to have a place to learn all of the information about myself and what I was seeking without having to do all of that learning myself over that extensive amount of time.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
That is such a powerful story, Kyler. Thank you so much for sharing. Can I ask you a quick question?
Please, yeah.
When you began this getting serious, did you have any idea how hard it would be? Or did you believe that once you got serious, it wouldn't be that much time before you figured it out?
I thought it was a mindset thing. I thought, okay, I've given into this. It's something that I've wanted for a while. I'm finally deciding to quit, so it's not going to take that long. And I remember telling myself again and again and again, this is the last time, this is the final time that I'm going to engage with this content. This is the final time that I'm going to masturbate. This is the final. And it set up this cycle of hope, confidence, arrogance, the inevitable fall, and then shame. And it would happen on a repeating basis. Um, every couple of days, every few weeks. I mean, even when I had that year where I avoided masturbating to porn, um, I had that same thought of, okay, I'm finally done with this. And even though I was still, letting those cracks form in my resilience and my attempts to break free, I still was like, no, no, it's just a small deal. It's not a big problem. Like, I'll just not do it ever again. Like, yeah, I happened to look at that website today, but I won't look at it tomorrow and I won't look at it anymore. Um, yeah, so I mean, it really was that cycle because the shame hits you hard and you decide to make a new change and you feel driven. Okay, finally, this is the time I'm going to change. And then you make a change and you see a little bit of success. And then you have that arrogance of, okay, it's over. I got this. And then, of course, you start making those compromises because you're like, I'm not going to fall back into it again. Like, I already got this. Look at this success that I've had so far.
Mhm.
And then you do.
And so when we think about the topic of today's conversation, what is the number one obstacle that prevents relationships from recovering? It is the optimism bias, because that power that you feel when you are in your recovery journey and you are making these significant moments of increased awareness and your ability to see how you can apply different concepts in your recovery journey, it makes you feel unstoppable in moments like, I understand this now, exactly as you were just describing. I understand this now. There's no way that I could fall into these same pitfalls again. I've got this. And when we have those emotions, all emotions feel like they're permanent, whether they're good or whether they're bad. And so it's totally normal that men feel this way. They feel like, I'm never going to struggle with this again. This isn't something that's going to present me an issue. We work with guys all the time who enter our program, and at the very beginning of their journey with us, they'll express these different things, this confidence, this optimism bias that is just a normal way that human brains work, right? This isn't something that's like inherently wrong with men who are in this process of recovery. This is something that all humans on one level or another in some area of their life will experience at some point. And so we have to be aware that that's a thing, that that's there, because we don't want to fall into the pitfall that in those moments when we're experiencing those emotional highs, we don't want to actually believe that that's true, because there's so much to understand, become aware of, and learn and implement over and over and over and over again in this process that's going to be required to actually do the rewiring work that we're needing to get our subconscious on board with where our conscious mind is at.
Yeah, another word for that helps explain optimism bias is uninformed optimism, which is what you're just saying,
Mhm.
that really anything that we are in trying for the first time, we're not informed yet. We have not done it. We've never been through it. So our brains believe that it's going to be pretty easy. Like even things that are challenging, we're like, yeah, it'll be challenging, but I got this. I can do this. And like Rick said, that's totally normal. And Kyler, you experienced it too when we are finding ourselves continually falling into these pitfalls. That means that there's a lot more that we need to understand about what the process looks like in order to actually believe that we can feel confident and feel confident that we can feel confident rather than having this naivety, right, about this optimism that shouldn't be there. And that's the pitfall. Like that's the biggest obstacle to relationship recovery, because when both partners are believing that there's hope that this is now never going to happen again,
Mhm.
and then it does, and then trust is rebuilt, and then it does, and it happens again and again and again.
Crushing.
Both people are crushed. Yeah. And the discouragement that comes, the overwhelm that comes. And Kyler, when you were going through your process and it was a 7-year long journey, Were you in a relationship during that time at any part of that?
I wasn't in a relationship at all during that process. One of the um, realizations I'd had during the first couple of years of trying and failing is that this is something that would really hurt somebody if I got into a relationship with them. So although there was definitely a longing and a desire to be in a relationship, I did intentionally avoid dating people during that time until I had conquered that addiction. Because I didn't want to bring somebody else into something that I knew could hurt them significantly. And I had a few mentors in my college years who I saw the um, disastrous impact that porn had in their relationship and in their marriage. So, um, so yeah, I didn't have a relationship during that time. I'm kind of glad that I made that decision.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a really wise decision. And it can give you more time really to figure it out and take that time that you need to. When couples are in a relationship and going through this, there's so much more urgency to figure it out. And that can actually be a negative impact on men in their process too, because suddenly there's even more added stress, lots of it, because they don't have unlimited amounts of time to figure it out because their partner is getting put through so much betrayal and so
Mm.
much pain, and it's destroying their family. So it is something that makes it even more difficult when you are in a relationship trying to go through this.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. I can imagine trying to have another person be a part of that process and the stress it would have. I mean, the impact on myself was already significant, but to then bring additional hurt and pain to someone else in that process, I was very fortunate that it was just me during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting that for your story, it's very different than a lot of guys that we talk with. And it's a lot different than what my experience was as well. Like, even though when I got into a relationship with Katie, I already knew that pornography was an issue in my relationships. I'd had that self admission and acknowledgement and understanding and saw a trend of all my failed relationships that this is coming up over and over again, where I'm going to porn instead of going to my partner. And so when Katie did ask me the question, like, what's going on here? Why aren't you attracted to me? Why aren't you coming on to me? Like, what's up? Like,
Why has that changed
we're
so
a few months
quickly?
into the relationship. What's going on here? I was like, I'm pretty sure it's the porn. Like, I
Mm,
had known prior to coming into the relationship, but there was never actually that consideration or understanding of how that could potentially impact a partner when I did have that self admission. And so
mm.
I think that there's probably a lot of women who may be watching or listening to this right now and be like, yeah, why didn't you think about that? And I have to say, like, that's truly something that's unique to you, which is just another great sign of how incredible of a person that we have, that for so long your brain has been in that mindset of considering the impact of your actions on other people and what that's going to be like and the values that you had even going into your recovery process. It's just a really profound thing to see.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that did bring up one quick thought for me too, and it's that I feel like a lot of the time single men will think that all I have to do is get in a relationship and, this addiction will be over. Like suddenly I'll have an outlet. I'll have someone to have sex with, which is just awful to think of it in that way anyways. But they think that that's going to somehow free them from their addiction. And while, of course, I myself can't explicitly speak to that, the experience that I have heard, both from you and from the men in this program and from other men in my life, it's just not true. And all you do is you bring another person into your addiction who you can just hurt with that.
Rick, I know that in our process, you've mentioned as we're coming back to the topic of just how difficult this is when you don't have the luxury of taking the time that you need to figure it out on your own, and you've got a partner that you're hurting tremendously every time you fail. I know that we've discussed this before and what it was like for you, and I didn't see this point till later because it wasn't something that I would have been receptive or open to at the time going through it with you. But I remember you told me afterwards that it really felt unfair to you
Mhm.
to have all of this pressure to urgently need to figure this thing out. And, and if you didn't, that it was going to be over between us, and not really knowing what that really is going to take, or, how to not just have another time that you're confident that you got this and then you don't. What was that? Can you speak to that experience a little bit from your side?
Yeah, I think it's so complicated, and as Katie loves to say, it's intricately interwoven in the process of recovery when you're doing this as a couple. Because as a betrayed partner, of course, you're not going to have any of that emotional empathy, or like true significant emotional empathy for the hurt and the sadness and the pain that your recovering partner is going through. Because with each relapse, with each slip up, there is betrayal. Like, it's not a slip, like that is a deep cut that hurts. And that's one of the things that we try and do in our program, is really give the verbiage and the meaning that is really deserved in those different interactions with what it means to have a slip, or what it means to relapse. Like, they're all relapses. They're just different degrees of relapses, and they're all betrayal. And so it makes perfect sense for why there's not going to be that strong ability to even want to consider what's going on for her partner until he's able to actually give her true sobriety, true recovery, true healing, and safety to be able to consider, what was this like for you? When a man who's in a relationship is going through this recovery process, is putting in such tremendous effort to overcome his addiction, what he's really looking for is to be seen by his partner. It's incredibly difficult to be able to project, how am I actually going to experience closeness and feel like this effort that I'm putting in is rewarded and seen and appreciated and understood for what it's taking me to make these changes. And it makes sense too why in that moment it's so difficult for a woman to be able to give that to him. And so many times couples will say, why can't we do this on our own? It's like, that man needs to be seen. He needs to be in a community where he is told time and time again that as he is putting in these efforts and he is making progress, that he's a worthy human being, and that there's nothing wrong with him for the different things that he's overcoming and challenging. That's really what stood out to me, as Kyler was sharing earlier, is just about how much of the psychological aspects that came up in the process was something that he had to become aware of, to be able to identify and call out. And it has to be in those moments as they're happening that you recognize it, to be able to take the power away. Because when we can't name the different experiences of what's going on for us psychologically, then it feels hopeless to understand how you could possibly make a different choice.
I think another reason that couples need to understand that it is very important not to do this alone is because the whole concept we were talking about earlier of uninformed optimism, or optimism bias, where you really don't know what you don't know until you have this continue to be a problem over and over and over. And unfortunately, when you don't know the areas to be doing work on, that process just naturally extends for years and years until you figure all of those different pitfalls out. And that's really what happened with Rick and I, is that, we also didn't think that we could afford it. We thought, well, we need to use our money wisely. And right now we just can't afford that. So we'll just figure this out on our own. We've already overcome this, so we can definitely overcome that. For Rick, he had already overcome years of addiction to cigarettes. He had overcome episodic alcoholism. He had overcome addiction to Adderall. Like, he had previous addictions that he had overcome. And he's like, well, if I could do that, I can do this. I know I want it. I know I love her and she's worth it. So it's that whole optimism bias of, this time I got it. Oh, well, now I understand this differently. So now I'm good. And you don't know that there's another hole and another minefield and another, like, there's just so many more to come. And unless somebody's taking you through that minefield and saying, don't step there, right? You don't know until you stepped on it. Mm-hmm. And then for the women, we have a limit of what we can handle psychologically and in our body physically. And that is why when women get to this point where they're like, one more time and I'm done. That's the point we got to. And that is actually why I ended my relationship with Rick for a time and didn't believe it was going to ever work out, because it had been too many landmines that he continued to step into. And I couldn't do it anymore. I'd been through too much, and it was devastating. It was destroying me. So that's again where I want to put emphasis here, is that it is so important that couples understand the critical urgency here to get the right help so that they know how to navigate these things.
Yeah, you mentioned like the difficulty of finally taking the leap and paying for a program. Um, I think something that a lot of people don't realize, and I honestly didn't realize for much of my addiction until I was finally able to kind of look back on it all, is the cost of the addiction itself. Pornography is not as obvious of a costful addiction as maybe alcoholism or like a nicotine addiction or something where you're constantly buying something, right? Because after all, there's so much free content online. Not to say that there aren't people who spend money on pornography, and in that case, it's probably a very similar experience. But I think even when you're in the midst of an addiction, even when that content is free, um, you still have a mindset in a way where you are so focused on this addiction and it's something that you're continuously going back to, that you're not improving yourself in, that's preventing you from engaging with more healthy behaviors, which inevitably ends up costing you down the road. I I can't help but wonder if I had made war against this addiction much earlier in my life and had found success with it much earlier in my life, how many other opportunities I would have had with um, just like business opportunities, or if I'd have had more confidence to be able to engage with other employment, or if I'd have had better opportunities to be in a relationship since I was really focused on and not in a relationship during those 7 years. And so, it is costly in its own way, just because it's that opportunity cost. Whatever I learned and whatever I gained after those 7 years, if it had only taken a single year, that would have been 6 years with a much healthier mindset and a drive and an ability to apply that confidence in other areas of my life as well.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really about developing that clarity for yourself so that you can live life on purpose. And
Mm.
so when we're talking about that opportunity cost, it's like, yeah, what is the purpose that I want to be able to live my life with? What's the relationship that I want to get to have? And how long have I been dealing with this? How long have I had this addiction for? How long has my partner been talking to me about this addiction and wanting me to change it? How much time have I already lost? What has that cost me in my relationship, in the way that my partner can have peace, where we can go out into a public place and she doesn't have to worry about whether or not I'm looking at another person, whether I'm fantasizing about somebody else, whether when we're being intimate later that night, I'm actually thinking about her and being present with her and enjoying the moment with her, or if there's something else on my mind that's not even about her and I'm using her as an object, right? There's so much cost that comes along with the delayed efforts that are required to overcome this process. It's countless. Like that's like a
Seriously.
drop in the bucket. It's like a pinhead of
The
the
cost.
cost that is there. That's a day in, day out thing for betrayed partners, the level of hypervigilance that they experience and the traumatic experience that they're living every single day, every
Mhm.
single moment.
You
And
really do. And the cost to their kids, if they have kids, you really do have to ask yourself when you're thinking about if cost is what's standing in your way of getting help. Um, yeah, what's the cost of getting help versus the cost of not getting help?
Mhm. And for men, it's like, well, what is it costing us? Like, what I would be willing to bet that the majority of men who are watching this right now, from the time that they were a little child, they probably had this innate desire to find somebody in their life that they could spend their life with, that they could be a good husband to, that they could enjoy their relationship, have fun, and just get to explore the world with, to get to do life with. And never in their wildest dreams did they ever think that they would actually stumble on this thing called pornography that would strip the ability for them to ever get to experience those things. And so when we talk about recovery, we really need to go and look at what are the desires that I've always innately wanted for myself that I know that are there that I excuse away with pornography. What is it that pornography is preventing me from having? What's the relationship that I want to have? What's the level of respect and consideration and care that I want to be able to have for my partner that we just look at each other and our faces just light up because like, oh my gosh, I get to do life with you. Like you're incredible. I just love every single day being in your presence and getting to do this journey with you in life. And when that's not there and you're just in the day-to-day mundane interactions where it's more like your business partners who help to run a household versus your people who are in an intimate relationship and are romantically connected and getting to just enjoy life together.
And exclusively connected in that way because
Right.
no one else gets to have that with them
Right.
but you.
Yes,
Mhm.
it's an entirely different situation. And so that's what really has to help to propel the vision of what's pulling you forward. So we want to think about, the pain of what it is that we're causing our partners to help to drive us away from our current behaviors. And we also need a vision that's going to pull us forward into the future that we're creating. Because if you don't have a strong enough why for what it is that you're going for, then you'll never actually complete the journey. There has to be a desire that makes it worth it.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to the main topic of this whole thing on optimism and that bias, the optimism bias, um, it's critical to remember that when you do have that inspiration for change, and then you do learn something new that now gives you that new confidence that maybe this can be it, maybe this is going to be the last day, that you don't fall into that trap. Definitely take that emotion and use that as energy to fuel your fight against the addiction and to continue looking for that support, and to continue making war against it. But you can't get overconfident and you can't get arrogant about it, and you can't think, oh, I'm going to be able to do this alone, because it's just going to extend the battle further and further and further. And I would say on the other side of the coin, in the exact same way, when it comes to that shame as well, we can fall into that exact same pit of I've fallen into it. I'm never going to escape. This is never going to be something that I'm going to get rid of. We have to stay in that middle ground. We can't have this total pessimism and lack of hope that we're ever going to get out of it. But we also can't get overconfident and have this um, naive optimism that we're going to be able to make it out ourselves and that this is the last time, without doing all of that work that it takes to actually really heal the heart of the issue and be able to have that long-term progress.
Very well said. We do have a resource that is free called the Roadmap to Recovery, and you can find that at www.rewireforsuccess.life/roadmap. And you can go ahead and take a look on there. We've got 7 different destinations that are required throughout the recovery process. So you can visit that resource and you can take a look at a lot of the overarching themes that are in each of those 7 destinations. So the answer really is to use that roadmap kind of as a resource to say, okay, here's the different things that I need to make sure that I'm addressing throughout my recovery journey and make sure that I'm not missing anything. And I'm going to get help so that I can learn how to implement these things right away rather than having to be the one who's going out and reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, save yourself the headache from going through a 7-year long process like me.
Definitely.
7+ years.
Yeah.
3 to 5 for us,
Yeah.
depending on where you want to count.
Don't make the mistakes that I made, or don't make the mistakes that Rick and Katie made. There are resources out there. It's a fight that we don't have to take alone. We don't have to drag out the process. For those who are single men, you don't have to fight for 7 years before you finally get over this addiction. There's resources for you. For those in relationships, don't allow this addiction to continue harming you and your partner, and don't let this addiction continue to let you betray your partner. Time is of the essence.
Yeah.
So,
Love that.
but thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend to join us here for this recording.
Thank you. The pleasure's all mine.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We will see you next week. Take care.